This work is literally explaining the way the human brain functions to keep a human being alive. And so if you need to go the science route, it's there for you. If you need to go more of the spiritual route, it's there for you. But in the end, the only thing matters is, how do you feel today? And if the answer is not great in whatever way, shape, or form, then this is your life. Isn't it worth just replacing your fear and your anger with curiosity?
Welcome to episode 110 of the Mikhaila Peterson podcast. This episode is with Nicole Sachs. Nicole Sachs is a speaker, writer, podcaster, and psychotherapist who has dedicated her work and her practice to the treatment of chronic pain. She's a faculty instructor at the Omega Institute, the Art of Living Retreat Center, and author of The Meaning of Truth, Embrace Your Truth, Create Your Life. I wanted to speak to Nicole because my family has been through a lot in the last 5 years in particular, and I've been learning what I can to help them. Quick update on that. Things are much better now, and these podcasts, the next 4 of them, I believe, were recorded when things were really, really, really not good. So if you guys are worrying about us, we're good. I think the Petersons are back in the game, finally, for the first time in maybe 3 years. I had someone reach out and tell me that Nicole had really helped her with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, so this episode is about trying to treat that kind of thing psychologically. I hope you enjoy. Nicole Sachs, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. I was referred to you by somebody on Instagram who said you were the go-to person for trauma stuck in the body and how to relieve that. Yes. So I thought that would be fascinating to get into. Could we just start off by you giving a brief background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Nicole Sachs. I am originally a psychotherapist. That's how I sort of started this whole journey, because I was in private practice for many years. I no longer am. But actually, if we're going to be really honest, I started this journey as a patient of chronic pain, because when I was 19, I was diagnosed with a condition called degenerative spondylolisthesis, which is a severe abnormality of the lower spine. And that was delivered when I was 19. After let's say my back went out. That's the most easy way to describe it. When I was a freshman in college. And so I was carted home and I was subjected to all the tests. And this severe abnormality was found, which is that they gave me a pretty dark diagnosis. No travel, no sports, very strict sleeping positions, no more than 1 hour in a bouncy car, pretty much for the rest of my life at 19. So that was kind of harsh. And of course, the biggest one was the likelihood that I would have a biological child was slim to none, because the weight of the baby on the front would put so much stress on my lower back that it could send me into the kind of incident that would be irreparable, and I could end up in a wheelchair. So this was the prognosis at 19.
Oh my God, I had no idea. That's terrifying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it defines your life at that point. And so essentially, I look at this when I pan out and I look at the big lens. Obviously, this was all part of my journey and what was meant to bring me to where I am today, which from what I know about you, Mikhaila, is similar. I think, we all use our personal journey as part of the steps on the path, to where we're going. And so that's where it began. I will really make the story short, which is I traveled through my life with a great deal of fear and trepidation, but also with an understanding that just out there a little bit that life was bigger than this. And I didn't quite know how it was going to turn out, but it wasn't going to be as simple as what they were prescribing to be my life. And as I moved through my experience, I came into the world of mind-body medicine and understanding about brain science and about the nervous system, about what it does to the body to be in sustained fight or flight, and what that does to the different systems of the body. And my primary mentor and teacher was Dr. Sarno. I don't know if you've heard of his work, but he was the pioneer of what I teach. He was an attending physician at the Rusk Center for Rehabilitation at NYU Medical Center for 50 years. He passed away at the age of 94 a few years ago. And so he was the pioneer. He kind of wrote the original theory that I took and evolved into what I do today. And he was also originally my doctor. Then he became my colleague. Then he started referring into my practice. And so it's a great source of pride that I was directly connected to him before his death, so I could have that one-on-one interaction with this genius man and then bring his theories to the fore. And so through doing the work and through understanding the brain science and understanding that I was not broken, that actually we all look different on the outside and we all actually look different on the inside too. And just because I do have the same severe spinal abnormality, if you take my MRI today, you will see it. It never degenerated. I had 3 biological children and exercised till the day they were born. I travel the world. I play sports. I exercise. I'm more fit maybe than I've ever been. I'm 49. And I just live a completely unencumbered life because I understand this stuff. So essentially, I was in private practice for years, and my patients were like, you can't confine this to the 4 walls of your office. They really encouraged me. It was them who encouraged me. And so that's when I first wrote the book. I wrote my first book in 2012. I rewrote the whole thing in 2016 because I had learned so much more. And that's when I started sort of traveling the world and teaching and running retreats and writing online courses. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, trying to bring this message to the global community, because every time I reach another person and have them tell me their story, and Mikhaila, the stories are really dark. I mean, as I know you know from yourself and your father, chronic illness can bring you to the darkest places possible.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that it is a regular occurrence that I will hear from somebody from Australia, from Africa, from India, from South America, someone I've never met, that says, I was contemplating my suicide. I was on my couch at 3 a.m. on a deep dive in Google because nobody could tell me what was wrong with me, or they could tell me all these diagnoses, but no one could fix anything. And I was in such severe pain or anxiety or panic that I was planning my suicide. I kind of tripped over your work in this sort of crazy coincidence, whatever you want to call it. And I've been doing it for 6 months, and I'm thrilled to report I'm back to work full time. I'm getting married. I'm having a baby, like these crazy stories. And so I'm just incredibly passionate, not only for my own body and my own world, which is my life is my message, but also just for the way it helps people to bring this message far and wide.
Okay. That was a great intro. So what is your work? How do you do the work to get out of that kind of chronic pain?
Okay. So first of all, I want to make sure to define chronic pain correctly, because chronic pain is not just back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, migraines, fibromyalgia, although it is all these things. It's also chronic fatigue. It's also anxiety in all its forms, panic in all its forms, irritable bowel disease and stomach problems in all their forms, many skin disorders. And then it can be as gentle, if you will, as a lack of joy for life, an exhaustion, an inability to see just the lightness through the clouds. It's basically the way every single person is in the world. There's no cure for the human condition. But when I say chronic pain, when I first started my brand, I had to pick something. So I picked the cure for chronic pain because I needed to find a place to start. But it's just so much bigger than that. So I always feel the need on the front end to define that correctly, because I want the umbrella to be big enough to fit anyone underneath it that qualifies, which is kind of every human being, even if it's just, like I said, a lack of joy for life. We all deserve the whole buffet, not the scraps under the table. So, okay. So having said that, there are 3 facets of my work. So you say, what is the work? Believe, do the work, and patience and kindness for yourself. So I really think all 3 of those facets are equally important. So and I'll explain them briefly. So believe is essentially, we're talking about brain science. So your nervous system will protect you without your permission and without asking your opinion. So your belief that something can help you, your perception of being helpable, if you will, is your reality. And I'll give an example. I tell this story sometimes. I was in London. I think it was like 15 years ago, let's say. And I was in the midst of the city downtown, wasn't paying attention, looked the way I would assume a bus would be coming, and stepped into the street to cross the street. Being a New Yorker, I don't follow traffic rules very well. I'm sort of, a little bit brash that way. And so I just started to walk. By the time the double-decker bus whizzed past my face, so I could almost I felt the air in my face, and I literally almost felt like it could brush past my nose. I was already back on the curb with no memory, and no intention of jumping back there. It is amazing what your brain and your nervous system will do for you when the perception of danger is detected. Obviously, before I had any place to have an opinion or give permission, my brain went into action. It jumped my body back on the curb. I 1,000,000% would have been dead. It flew past me so fast and so close. And I always use that example to just kind of hammer home the intensity of this process and the reflexivity of this process. This is an automatic process when we are being protected. So when I say believe, and I'd say the largest part of my work, the biggest body of my work, is to help people believe, which is why my podcast is focused so much on success stories and on interviews and on real-time heals, which is something I do where I do a cold therapy session with someone I've never met, and they tell me their story, and I literally in real time work with them so people can see how this works. And I do all this stuff on the regular. So that's available to anyone who's interested. I spend so much time helping people believe because our fear and our resistance to this process is part of the nervous system protecting us, because the brain and the nervous system perceive our stored trauma and our repressed emotional world as a greater predator than our physical pain conditions or state of being.
That makes sense.
Right? So like, let's say, for example, you have capital T trauma. Let's just take it to the biggest extent. Capital T trauma, abuse, neglect, being raised in a wartime situation, anything that is extremely traumatic. The memories of that and the reliving of that are perceived by your nervous system as much more dangerous than a migraine or fibromyalgia or anything that makes you stay small and quiet and lay down and stay away from the world. So it will keep you there in a quite loving and protective way until we can make our systems aware that it's safe to feel these things. And of course, it's not always safe, but there's work to be done, which is in the second facet of do the work. There's work to be done to convince this system that protects us without our permission that we can feel, that we can be with our experiences. Once that happens, and this is why the work can be rather miraculous, if you deign to use that word, the nervous system is like a switch. When you flip from fight or flight to rest and repair, systems go into equilibrium remarkably quickly, because in many ways we are incredibly similar to the animal world. So if you look at like a herd of gazelle, they'll be grazing, they'll be at the watering hole. The predator is introduced, the lion walks onto the savanna, the whole herd goes up, the ears go up, they start communicating with each other. Everyone is tense, they're ready to flee. And let's say it just casually keeps walking. Maybe it just fed or whatever. As soon as it's out of energetic range, the whole herd usually shakes it off. They go back to grazing. They don't run 50 miles just in case it comes back. That's not the way our animal brain works. And that's the part of us that is protecting us, even in our evolved human state. And so once we flip that switch, once we allow the brain and the nervous system to understand that this stuff we've experienced, although traumatic, although incredibly painful, is safe to feel and to be with, and that we can do that, the pain signals stop firing. This is why people have these incredible transformations. I have clients regularly who are in motorized wheelchairs or are bedbound for more than a year, like really long time, that are now running marathons. I mean, I'm not joking. This stuff is insane in terms of the transformations. So I don't want to keep going if you have questions, but that's the belief part. Yeah, go ahead.
I do. How do you convince somebody who's been in chronic fight or flight or chronic pain for years that they can calm down? Because that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, you're asking an excellent question. Just like throwing me these softballs, because you can't. You can't, because it's the nervous system, and it's the same thing that's took me off the curb in London. That's why we do the second thing, which is we do the work, because no one can calm your nervous system down but you. I can talk you into belief, or I can talk you into suspension of disbelief. I can bring you to a place where you're open, but nobody can do the work for you, which is another really unfortunate part of this that people can feel really angry about because it's I often say my work is simple, but it's not easy, meaning what I'm about to explain to you today, Mikhaila, is not going to blow your mind. And it's simple. It is pretty simple, but the reason it's not easy is because it takes consistent, patient work with ourselves to bring the nervous system, which has the mentality of, let's say, an abused child or an abused animal, like a dog, that is ready for attack or for flight or for fawning or for being frozen. It's ready. It's at the ready. So the way you convince oneself or a person is by doing the work. And so what the work is, I teach a practice called journal speak. Now, journal speak is indeed a journaling practice, but it's not just a journaling practice. It's essentially teaching you a foreign language. It's teaching you to be fluent in a second language. And the way that works is that I teach people to go to the places that are very triggering, gently and softly, by doing it at the pace of their own consciousness. And so essentially, here's the way it works. You make 3 lists. One is labeled childhood, which could also be labeled past stressors. One is labeled daily life, which is anything that is the constant onslaught of what we're dealing with today, which oftentimes there are bridges between the two. And the third is personality, because a lot of people that are the highest, for lack of a better word, highest strung, most susceptible to this kind of dance between the brain and the nervous system are people who are perfectionistic, who are goodist, meaning it's very important to be seen as a good person, to be helpful. People who are rather codependent, meaning like enmeshed, like I'm not really okay unless you're okay. People who are their own worst critic. People might tell you you're okay, but if you find some problems with yourself, that's going to consume you. And this energy of this kind of personality, and there's many other traits, can really feed. It's the lens through which every experience is filtered, because we are who we are. And so we make 3 bulleted lists, and they don't have to be they don't have to expose you in any way. It's like names of people or big categories like money, or like for me, I moved a lot as a child, like constantly. And so I was always making new friends. So like moving was like a huge thing in my childhood that really got me unmoored. So the list is exhaustive. It's really just a brain dump to the best of your ability. You can always add to the list of everything that could be just a thing. And people get, especially the personality types, get very like, I want to do this correctly. So I get a lot of questions about the lists, and I'm like, no. There's no way to mess this up unless you just choose not to do it. And the list also could be something so potentially trivial as like that time in 4th grade with the bully. But that time in 4th grade with the bully matters, and it affected you if it affected you. And sometimes the things you think are going to be the biggest heavy hitters turn out to be just playing your tapes and just your stories. And sometimes the smallest things that you think were no big deal open up an experience that can really be transformative. So once people make these lists, I teach them this practice called journal speak, which is an impolite, unfettered rant, an allowing of the inner child, because I also do a lot of work around inner child work, allowing of the inner child to scream, to cry, to be a victim, to win the argument, because even the best parents, even the most loving parents shut us down as kids. It's the very nature of childhood versus adulthood. And so there's a reservoir inside of us of rage, shame, sadness, grief that has been unfelt, experiences that have not been seen and heard, terror, fear, meaning. There's so much. Okay. So this reservoir exists inside of us. And what the journal speak process does is it dips a ladle in this reservoir and it dumps it off every time you do it. And so the reason for chronic symptoms is that when the reservoir, I know I'm giving you a lot of information, but I'm sorry, but it's like, there's so much to this.
It works.
Okay. Just interrupt me, please, if it's too much. When the reservoir hits maximum density and threatens to spill over and inform your conscious brain, the one that the nervous system is always monitoring for danger, how overwhelmed you are, how terrified you are, how unable to manage you are, how triggered into your past trauma you are. When it hits maximum density, that's when a symptom fires, because essentially the symptom fires to protect you, because it is a protective mechanism. If you can feel your fibromyalgia, your migraine, your back pain, your shoulder pain, if you can give it meaning, if you can go to the doctor, if you can obsess on it, what was going on over here calms down. You stop thinking about it because you only have the capacity to think very seriously about one thing at a time. And so
it's a distraction.
It is a distraction. It is a protective distraction, and it freaking works. Because as soon as you are attending to your health, which without our health, we have nothing. We all know that. And as soon as you're attending to your health or your pain, which will get your attention just like this before anything else, these this mental tumult over your unresolved stuff, it lays down. It really works. I mean, if you start thinking about it in yourself, we all can come to understanding how it really works. And so essentially what this journal speak is doing is gently and systematically for 20-minute sessions at a time, followed by a 10-minute loving kindness meditation. So it's a 30-minute practice, dumps a ladle out, calms us down. And through repetition and practice, what ends up happening, and I have 20 years of experience to the most crazy transformations, the stuff over here, the distraction stops happening. People often say it's magic. And I'm like, it's not magic, it's brain science. But it feels like magic when it stops happening, because you can't believe that just unearthing this stuff and sitting with it makes migraines go away. Migraines are so physical. They make you throw up. They make you blind. And another thing that's like kind of amazing about my ability to teach this is I have gotten everything. I've been treating people for over 20 years. I got it all. I had the migraines. I had the fibromyalgia. Because it would run through me, almost like my body needed to show me how to teach. It's been amazing. And I am a person who is chronic pain free across the board, because chronic pain is an epidemic of fear and meaning. Chronic pain isn't about the pain. It's about the fear of the pain. It's about the anticipation of the pain that sends the nervous system into this fight or flight, leaves it there, and then creates. It's an unfortunate vicious cycle. And I'll just throw it in there so then we can open it up for questions. The patience and kindness, which is the third aspect, is just so integral, because we are not kind to ourselves. We are not self-compassionate. We beat the shit out of ourselves at every turn. That's what we do. And that continues to dump in the reservoir, and it keeps this system going. And so I do a lot of work on inner child work and on self-compassion, not hippy dippy self-love. I'm talking real solid, I am here with you as if you would be with a friend. So that's the overview.
5 years ago, I would not have believed any of that at all. But after I stopped taking medication, so SSRIs specifically, and started, because that really put a kind of a wall up or numbing on all of my emotions, which I didn't realize until afterwards. But when I started experiencing these emotions properly, I realized that if I didn't experience them, if I just kind of shut them down, that it would cause pain.
Right.
And I was like, that's amazing. So if if you're in a horrible situation and you don't cry, and you don't experience grief, my arms hurt. I get like spots on my arms that feel like somebody's pushing on them.
Yes.
I was like, oh, that's what that was. It's a little bit odd to have an autoimmune disorder and then to also have emotional things impact you physically. And I guess it's more obvious if you think about a rat in a cage that's being stressed.
Yes.
They're going to physically show that, right? They're going to lose hair and things. It's going to physically impact them. But I wouldn't have believed it 5 years ago, especially not for something as serious as, fibromyalgia or chronic pain.
Well, I completely empathize with that. What to me is the most amazing, expansive part of the human experience is there are tons of things that you could say, I wouldn't have believed 6 months ago. I wouldn't have believed 6 days ago. I'm just going to throw it in here just because it's timely. One of my very, very dear friends died in the Miami building collapse this week.
Oh my God.
And I'm
so sorry.
Thank you. And it's been absolutely consuming me, but because I'm so in tune with my mind-body system and the way it moves through me, I'm literally feeling how my grief and how my anger and how my shock is moving through my body. And it's like, it's an experience that I had not had, and I could have explained it. I could have speculated on it a week and a half ago, but today I feel it differently. So what's amazing to me is the way we evolve constantly. And if we're just open to understanding that we don't know everything, if we are just open to that,
that's for sure.
It can be a much more educational experience being alive. And so I empathize that you didn't understand this 5 years ago, or you wouldn't have been open to it. But that's what's amazing about this human journey, is like, if we can just stay willing, it keeps informing us.
Okay. So then I'm going to ask this. This is kind of the same thing I already asked, but my mom had cancer, and she's in remission, and whatever she tapped into when she thought she was going to die has really helped her express emotions. I'm going to just stumble through this, express emotions and try and like let go of almost what she couldn't control. And she did that partly through AA, partly through religion, but whatever she's done has completely changed how she reacts to fear and stress and all of those things. This episode is brought to you by grass-fed beef organs by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements makes New Zealand-sourced nose-to-tail organ meats, bone marrow, and beef organs in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Traditional peoples, Native Americans, and early ancestral healers believed that eating the organs from a healthy animal would strengthen and support the health of the corresponding organ of the individual. For instance, the traditional way of treating a person with a weak heart was to feed the person the heart of a healthy animal. Similarly, eating the kidneys of a healthy animal was believed to support urinary ailments and overall kidney health. Pancreas was fed to people with digestive problems, and spleen was fed to people with immune and blood deficiencies. Our early ancestors knew this, which is why their traditional diets included the frequent and nourishing consumption of nose-to-tail organs. Visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. How would you start a conversation with somebody who you think could be helped by this, but isn't there, like isn't ready to believe that? Is there something you can do that can maybe open them up?
It's an interesting question because it gets into spirituality and it gets into readiness. What is true readiness? But I'm going to answer it anyway. My initial knee-jerk reaction is people become ready. And when they become ready, that's when they open. And when they open, that's when things can come in. Like your experience of feeling pain on your arms alleviate when you felt your feelings opened you to something that you could never have been convinced of. And so that's my knee-jerk reaction. But I feel like I can answer that a little bit better, which is my contention is that desperation leads to surrender, and surrender leads to openness and truth. And so what I do for people, let's say friends, right? So people who are not hiring me professionally, that are just people I love dearly, who I watch suffer. I stay close, not too close. I stay open. I hold space for their anger or their, people love to kind of give me the side eye and go, oh, well, I'm getting the back surgery. And I go, then that's what you're going to do. It's kind of like, what's the sound of one hand clapping? Like, I don't push back. I just stay really centered in what I know. So I'm not going to say what I believe, Mikhaila. I'm going to say what I know. And when I can stay centered in what I know and hold space for people to get desperate enough to surrender, that's what I do.
Shit. Okay. You know what? I thought it was going to be something like that. Cause I was thinking back to when I was like sick and really stressed and suffering. And there wasn't anything anybody ever said to me that suddenly switched something on. Yeah. It was all like pain and suffering, and then slow realization, more openness, what you said. So that's too bad, because it can be frustrating seeing people.
But I want to say, I agree with you. And trust me, there's no one more frustrating than me, especially with my freaking children. Okay. So I have a 13-year-old, an almost 17-year-old, and an almost 19-year-old. And these kids are living a human life. So they'll be stressed and they'll have like things like stomach things, or like, my daughter's a dancer and she'll get like foot pain and my foot, and all I want to do is be like, let's feel your feelings. And they just want to be like, screw you. So trust me, I empathize with that so tremendously. But here's another thing I want to say, because I always bring it back to the brain science, because it's the capital T truth.
Yeah.
We don't have a choice but to listen to our fear-based nervous system until there's a second option. So people that you see in that level of resistance it's like I have such compassion for them, because they're in option one and there's only option one for them, because they have not yet seen another option. But someone like your mother, brought to the brink of her mortality, got open to a second option. And so it's like, I almost feel like energetically, because even if you're not a spiritual person, you must believe in energy. It's the theories of relativity. It's Einstein, it's energy theory, it's quantum physics. It's true that we are all just energy, and everything in this society and in this world and in the human experience is an energy exchange. And so what I do when I'm with a person like that is I just center. I do a lot of meditation as well. It's just a personal practice. And I center myself in my compassion for their predicament, because they don't have a choice when they are in option one, which is the nervous system is locked into protecting them, which is an ideological as well as a physical experience. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, your mind will be closed if your nervous system thinks that feeling this stuff or opening yourself to this stuff is too damn dangerous. So that becomes an ideological paralysis that I can just sit in compassion for that person. And I do watch people open all the time.
Okay. I'm going to try to get around this in a way. You can tell me if this just wouldn't work, but is there any type of scientific paper that you could send to somebody who at least believes fully in that type of information, and then that could trigger their openness?
It's a great question. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical doctor. So my credentials are, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've done other foundational training, trauma-informed, that kind of stuff. But that's the extent of my experience. Having said that, Dr. Sarno's colleagues and the greater medical world are doing studies all the time. And this body of work is growing. And I'm on an international listserv where people are posting their papers. So yes, and it's not going to make a freaking difference. Like, I can't tell you how often I could bring. So I once had a meeting with one of the top doctors at Mount Sinai in New York, and he said he could get me in front of grand rounds. And he was really open. He was really a cool guy. He just was able to see the big picture. And I created an annotated bibliography of all these different studies that are really statistically significant studies. And they rejected me. They wouldn't let me come to ground rounds. So I stand in belief that the world is changing, that the pandemic helped us with this, that just consciousness and just the evolution of human thought helps us with this, that it will I will be invited more and more. It's just, we're in a space of change and flux, and I have to be patient.
Well, I hope you're right. Okay. So some more questions then.
Okay.
So I've learned how, and I think this might be wrong, but I think I have an easier time releasing emotion now as a female than a male. At least that's what I've seen from and talked about with like males around me about this kind of emotional release.
Yeah.
So I've seen men around me get really stressed out about something, and then they don't seem to have a switch like I have built where I can feel it, cry a bunch, and then feel that relief. And it doesn't feel appropriate for me to be like, maybe you need to have a cry, because they're like, I can't.
Right.
So are there things you use more specifically for men to allow them to feel that type of emotion?
Yeah. I think that what you're saying is absolutely right on, that culturally we have created norms. We haven't created them. We're just born into them that make certain feelings and certain emotive processes safer for a woman than for a man, or people who identify as female versus male. And so once again, it's sort of similar to the how can you convince someone question.
Yeah.
It all comes down to each person making hard choices. So oftentimes I say about this work, this will never be a top-down communication process of healing, meaning you're never going to turn on your TV and have the big pharma commercials talk about don't take this pill, feel your feelings. You're not going to go to your orthopedic surgery consult and have them say, hey, listen, back pain doesn't actually make pain go, and back surgery doesn't make back pain go away, which, by the way, largely and widely it doesn't. They won't say that. They're not going to be saying that to you. So this is a bottom up healing approach, which really means each person, him or herself, has to decide the answer to the most important question in the world, which is, how long would you like to suffer? And I can be standing in front of a hall before COVID, in front of a hall of 1,000 people, and I'm having this talk, and I get the eyes of as many people as I can, and I go, that's the question. How long would you like to suffer? And it's not supposed to be a question that insults people. It's supposed to be a question that empowers people. Because as soon as you decide in your own personal setting in here, no more, no freaking more. Okay. With that kind of intensity, like with what you can feel in my energy right now. No, enough. If you decide that, you can transcend male and female barriers of feeling. You can transcend your resistance and your disbelief. It must come from understanding that life is a choice between what hurts and what hurts worse. There's no third option. And it can be applied to the most banal, stupid thing. Like, do I want to eat this sugary snack? I want to eat this sugary snack. Here's how I usually feel after I eat it. But it's delicious. Okay. And so here we are in a situation of what hurts versus what hurts worse. And I would say on any given day, I'll eat it or I won't, depending on where I am. But there's no third option. There's no third option of eating the sugary thing and feeling great, because I know myself and that's not how it's going to go. So it's either eat it because it's more delicious to eat it and it's worth it to me, or not. So that's a small, and like, that goes all the way on the other spectrum of like, do I have a child or not? Right? Like, do I have a child or not? Do I want to forego my own needs from now until the day I die? Or can I live without having this child? Like, when I thought about being a mom, it was so, and I know you're a mom. Well, it was so clear to me, I will be suffering in pain worse if I don't have these children. I know they're going to steal my soul, and they're going to wreck me with their suffering, and they're going to like take away all my personal autonomy. I knew that. I was old enough to get it, but I wanted them. And so when you can align yourself with the truth that life is a choice between what hurts and what hurts worse, and when you can stop begging and pleading the universe for a third option where you can do what you want and have no suffering attached to it, that's when we get peace. That's when we can live in the presence of our experience.
Okay.
You get it? Yeah.
I do kind of get that. And what I learned over the last, I don't know, I guess 29 years realistically, but was that
whole thing,
the emotions I had, which was like, when I was little and I was diagnosed, I was confused, I was angry, that diagnosed with arthritis, right? And then there was a lot of confusion, a lot of anger, and a lot of fear through the medical system. And I remember deciding in grade 3 that I just wasn't going to cry anymore. It was like, I don't want to feel that. It's weak, but mostly I don't want to feel that, right? And that screwed me over for a really long time. And I've only recently realized that feeling it, even though it makes everything worse for a little bit because expressing that emotion hurts. The relief that comes after it is so worth expressing it.
Yeah.
And it seems like that seems obvious and it seems simple, like now that I've understood that, but getting angry or getting sad or feeling grief. I think grief is a really big one. Feeling grief for when things don't go right or when you see somebody else suffer, feeling that, and it kind of lets it go for some weird reason, which is amazing, really, that you can be sad and then express it and then not be as sad.
What I want you to understand, Mikhaila, is the moment before you figured that out, it hurt worse to cry. And that's the thing.
That's true.
The thing. And that's what people need to get. And that's why I do everything I can to release the shame connected to not healing fast enough or 5 years ago, or to not, doing things differently till you did things differently. Because the truth of the matter is it works both ways. In third grade, where you decided you're never going to cry again, that was the less painful option until it wasn't anymore. And what's really amazing, if we're aware, okay, so if we keep ourselves awake and aware and our eyes open, when those scales tip just enough that we can understand that staying where we are hurts more than the uncertainty and the fear of stepping out, when we're aware of that, then we move. And I think the most painful time, actually, the most painful time is when the scales have shifted, but we're not yet aware. So we're just suffering in the current choices in our present situation, not understanding why does it hurt so badly until, and maybe it could be in the form of listening to this podcast for one of your listeners, like until something, and it could be the breeze that blows past your face. Like it's so random. Something wakes you up and your eyes open and you go, wait a second. Hurts worse what I'm doing. That's why it's so hard right now. And that's why some people experience what they call an extinction burst, which is when they start doing this work, the pain actually gets worse. They start poking the hornet's nest of their trauma and of their repressed emotional world. And they're tempted to quit because like their pain is getting worse or their pain's moving around. So like, fine, my migraines went away, but my anxiety is crippling. And I say, yay, I'm all about that, because that means you have it on the run. And that means you are beginning this process of healing. So it's so important to be really gentle with yourself as you're going through it.
Okay. So speaking of being gentle with yourself, how do you teach people how to be kind to themselves? Do you have tricks for how to be kinder to yourself, or the meditations you use or something?
Yes. The first thing I want to say is, okay, so the first important thing to understand is it is important to be kind to yourself. For years and years, it never occurred to me that was important. I mean, I am a real reformed, like what you're seeing today is not the person, I have a fly, not the person that you would have seen when I was 25. I was a go, outcome dependent. I want the A. Everything requires, I don't want anyone to help me. I can do it all myself.
Yeah.
For like years and years and years. Probably a great deal of my chronic pain was a result of that. So I didn't, if you had told me, so you say 5 years ago, you wouldn't have believed what I'm saying. If you had told me in my 20s, let's say, that self-compassion was important, I would have told you to fuck off. Like I would have just been like, that's the dumbest. That is, first of all, it's for weak people. Second of all,
exactly.
Yes. Second of all, it's a waste of time. Third of all, it's like just not me. Like, how we all say that's just not me. Okay. So what I think the most important thing first is for people to know this is a real thing. Self-compassion is concrete. If you don't have it, you are suffering. It's like being thirsty and not having water. Like, I think people need to understand that if you don't feed this part of yourself, this part of your emotional consciousness, I could say this part of your heart, but that's even too soft. It's a part of the emotional energy that surrounds you. If you don't feed that, you will be irritable. You will be defensive. You'll be reactive. You'll push people away. These are concrete things that you don't want to do. They make your relationship suck. They make your life less full. And so sometimes the best thing I can do is give that list and be like, have you been feeling that way? And most people be like, yeah. And I'm saying, Okay, then first thing you need to know is self-compassion is the real deal. And it's not just what for people who, want to live on a commune. Like this is a very real thing. So that's first thing. Second thing is, cultivating best practices. Like I'm not an expert in self-compassion and I can't reinvent every wheel. So I look to the experts like Dr. Kristin Neff, Neff. She is a world-renowned researcher in self-compassion, and she has practices that I teach, crediting her. I teach them at my retreats because it's just using the tools that have been invented, but explaining them properly to people with the right context in order to open them to make everything is a practice. Everything is a practice. So it's like, if you wanted 6-pack abs, you could go to a trainer and they could be like, this is what you do. You do this, and you do this. And you could be like, that's very interesting. If you don't do it, it doesn't matter. So like, it's a practice.
Okay. That makes sense. Neff. Okay. I'm going to remember.
Yeah. And if you're interested, I mean, I don't want to go on and on if you have more questions, but if you're interested, I can explain to you a little bit about Kristin's work, but
I would. Yeah, a bit.
Okay. So essentially the kind of the gold nugget of it is, so we are very, very good as a society in practicing compassion, other compassion.
Yes.
So what generally we do in my retreats when we work on this stuff is we first cultivate what it would feel like, bring ourselves into the space of your best friend or your child or your dog or something you feel very warmly toward is suffering. How would you behave? What kind of body language would you use? What kind of words would you use? What kind of tone of voice would you use? So we kind of come into that space. And then I say, now I want you to picture the last time you really screwed something up. You really disappointed. You missed the mark. You really you messed up. What was the tone of voice? What was the body language that you used toward yourself? What were the word choices that you used toward yourself? So we start to, first of all, delineate between other compassion and self-compassion or lack of self-compassion. And we do some exercises around the physical feeling, like holding fists and feeling the energy of that and putting arms out and closing eyes and feeling the energy of that. And just understanding the difference, delineating between this feeling of self-loathing and self-criticizing and self-compassion. And then it kind of culminates in what we call a self-compassion break, which is bringing into your consciousness a problem that you're having. Okay. So it's not super big trauma. Like for me, I'll just give an example. It could be getting my daughter ready for camp and dealing with the fact that she had real anxiety about camp and then COVID happened. And then, so now I'm worried that she's going to struggle. And now there's all these COVID regulations on camp. So it's an irritating problem that gets me emotionally kind of up there, but it's not like a horrible life-ending problem. So you bring yourself into the energy of that, and then you do what's called a self-compassion break, which is you repeat 3 phrases. The first is simply, it's all labeling. This hand to heart. This is a moment of suffering. That's it. Okay. Isn't it amazing though? You feel that energy shift, just acknowledging, this is a moment of suffering.
I'm still at the stage where just hearing that makes me feel like snorting, which probably means I'm just not there and I'll be there in 3 months. But that kind of, this is a moment of suffering. I don't know how I could take myself seriously and do something like that, even though I fully believe you. Fully.
Okay, but that's so amazing.
Maybe I need 3 months.
No, but that's amazing, Mikhaila, because here we are in the midst of a conscious moment of conflict. You're conscious enough to know that you probably will shift on this.
Oh, 100%.
So,
yeah.
So you're not stuck in kind of the thickness of that moment where you're just okay, Nicole, whatever, move on. That's stupid. Right. So you're conscious enough to have an observational self. Look, I'm being a therapist right now, but you're confident enough to have conscious enough to have an observational self to say, that's so interesting. I'm observing that this is making me skeptical, or this is making me roll my inner eyes. Okay.
Yeah.
But what's incredible is I would invite you to try it maybe later, get yourself into the space of something that's really bothering you. Your kid isn't going through what my kid is, but your kid's going through something, or your dad's going through something, or somebody in your life is going through something that matters to you and it makes you suffer. And if you can bring, this is why in the retreats, this is a really powerful exercise, because people are each in their own little bubble of experience. And when you sit there in your discomfort and label it and say, this is a moment of suffering. Okay. You can take the hand off your heart if that's too cheesy for you, like labeling it, being present with it. So like the way you would if someone else were suffering and like you wanted to acknowledge, you wanted to see them, you wanted to make them feel seen and heard. Like you're not alone in this, essentially. This is a moment of suffering. We need to say that to ourselves, because when we're suffering, we feel so alone. Even if other people are suffering around us, our own personal hell feels very alone. And so the self-compassion break, the first sentence in that, which is, this is a moment of suffering, is an acknowledgement, is a seeing of like how we wish others might see us, or how we would be willing to see others, to acknowledge this sucks for you right now. This is hard for you. Okay. So maybe that can be a little bit more palatable.
Yeah. You know what? Something clicked while you were saying that. I sit with it now. Like I know enough that when I'm feeling the grief or compassion or stress or something, when somebody else is suffering, I'm aware enough to say, you know what, this feels horrible right now, but if I experience it, it'll go away. Mm-hmm. So it's not this is a moment of suffering, which is what I said, what made me slightly skeptical, but I don't think I've been naming it. I think I've just been experiencing it and being like, it's okay to experience this, but I haven't said this is what it is. So that's not very far apart.
No, you're not going to take 3 months. You might take 3 more minutes. You're almost there.
Okay.
You're so close. So that's the first sentence, which is, this is a moment of suffering. The second sentence is essentially, everybody suffers, right? It's just about taking this human experience that you're having and making it ubiquitous. Suffering happens for every person. You know, there's a line that I think is really powerful, which is, never compare your insides to other people's outsides. You know, like we're so used to like looking at other people and being like, they've got it all, especially in the world of social media and comparison. And what do they say? Compare and despair, you know? And so like, if you can, that second sentence, once you label your moment of suffering, to say, everyone suffers. Everyone is going through what they're going through in their own way, and opening yourself up to like basically being a member of the human race. And then the third sentence is just, in this moment, very simply, what can I do right now to be kind to myself? And it can be as simple as, I'm pausing the stupid, social media or wherever I'm on that's making me feel terrible. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going outside and I'm putting the sun on my face for 1 minute. Whatever it is, it breaks the cycle of that constant self-criticism or self-loathing or whatever negative ugliness you're feeling. And if you do that enough, it cultivates self-compassion. It's sort of a concrete way to cultivate self-compassion.
Okay. So those are just steps people could use to start being nicer to themselves.
Yeah. And also just to touch into the moment, because it's not just being nicer to yourself, it's to feel like in sort of a cellular way how to shift out of it. Because if, human beings are very unconscious beings. If we don't concretely shift out of things, we stay in them. So it's a practice.
Okay. That makes sense. Let's see. I had a whole bunch of questions for you. Okay. You talk a bit about chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's something I suffered from terribly. And then I managed to change my diet and get off of medication and probably start experiencing things. And it went away, thank goodness. But for people suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome, is it the same kind of steps that you talked about before? Trying to like ladle out unfelt emotions?
Yes. So this can be a really triggering conversation. I'm going to tell you that straight up, because first of all, chronic fatigue is incredibly challenging. Horrible. Really, it's a bad one. And I'm not saying that to make anyone frightened. If that's what it's no harder to recover from than anything else, but the experience of it is incredibly deflating, because without any energy to do anything, it feels impossible to take necessary steps, which is what we're trying to tell people to do. So I just want to bring connection to that chronic fatigue is a really, really tough one. Having said that, The other reason it's triggering, and this could be applied to chronic fatigue or any diagnosis, is that people get very tied and connected to their diagnosis because they have no other choice. So once again, I want to say this with complete empathy and love, because I've had almost everything has moved through me. So I get it, that including chronic fatigue, that what I'm about to say is the truth, which is your chronic fatigue is his back pain. His back pain is her pelvic pain. Her pelvic pain is his migraines. His migraines is her irritable bowel disease. It is immaterial the way this process shows up in one's body. So that can be triggering for people because people are like, I am a person with migraines. I have a migraine disorder. This has ruined my life. Don't tell me that I'm not a person with migraines. And I'm always saying, this is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the manifestation of the brain science that causes the nervous system into fight or flight, that causes these symptoms to fire, is it's just immaterial the way it shows up in people. So although chronic fatigue is certainly a thing, it's treated no differently than migraines or back pain or knee pain. And I just know that people really get very up in arms about this, but it's just the truth. And the reason I know it's the truth, and this is where you can either choose to believe me or not, and that's on your, that's on your path, whatever. I've been doing this for 20 years, over 20 years now, in my own body and with thousands and thousands of people around the world. And I watch what happens, which is they present with chronic fatigue. They start doing the work. The chronic fatigue lifts and they call me and they're like, I am having these chronic daily headaches. I can't get rid of them. And I say, I know, honey, I love you. It's okay. Let's keep going. And then they continue doing the work and they're unearthing more things and they're becoming more intimate with their trauma. And maybe they're making some changes in their lives, maybe, and not always, but like it happens. And then they're like, it's the damnedest thing. The headaches are gone. I haven't had a headache in 2 weeks. My anxiety is so high. And I say, I know. Because this is what happens. It's that like until the nervous system, which I said has the mentality and the emotional ability to understand as a 5-year-old child who's been abused, because it's a primitive system, we have to just stay with it consistently and kindly until, and eventually all these things that move through you, which by the way, this doesn't happen to everyone, but eventually it passes. And then you become a person who simply is living a human life. I'll get a headache. It's not like I never experience pain. It's just that I don't experience fear with it. So when I have a bad headache, I don't think I'm always going to have a bad headache. I think today was a lot and this is going on and this is going on. And there are things going on that I can't even possibly know what's going on. And I practice acceptance. Sometimes I take 2 Advil. Like I'm not like completely against the medical model, whatever, do whatever is you do. And then like I allow it to pass. I feel what I need to feel. I'll jump to my journal speak practice. I'll talk to my therapist. I'll go to a meeting, whatever. And then it passes. So the answer to your question is it's really all the same stuff.
Okay. Why would it manifest so differently in people?
This is where we have to open to the mystery of the human brain. So, there's a cliche, and I don't know what percentage we're up to in 2021, that the best scientists in the world only understand 6% of the brain. And I don't know what percentage we're up to, but it's not high.
Probably not 6.
Yeah, it's somewhere, but I have no idea. Okay. So the way I can explain this best is think about the phenomenon of adrenaline. So if a baby is trapped under a car, a parent in that moment will have the capacity to lift the car. It's been documented scientifically many times. It's an adrenaline response. It is a short period of superhuman strength that is enacted by a flood of cortisol and adrenaline based on real panic and need to preserve life that allows the brain to allow the body to lift a car. And you and I both know we could go outside right now with all our best intentions and there's no freaking way you're going to lift a car. Yeah. So this is truth. Okay. What I'm saying is truth. In that same fashion, the brain and the nervous system can perceive in each person the place in your body and in your system that it will be believed, that it will be enacted upon. Now, sometimes I believe this has to do with a structural abnormality. I do have I have spondylolisthesis. My MRI is jacked. Like if you show my MRI to an orthopedic surgeon who doesn't know about my work, they go pale. They don't know what to say to me. It looks really gross. I've seen it. I have a vertebrae that's shattered and replaced with scar tissue. I have 2 vertebrae that sit on top of one another without a disc. I have stress fractures above and below. I look mutated. It doesn't affect me at all, except for a couple physiological connections to spondy, which is that I have almost no flexibility in, like, I can't touch my toes. I can get down to like mid calf because it's just a structural, and it's very hard for me to sit up straight. Like when I meditate, I need to sit up against a wall or something because I have weakness. I have like, it's very mild, but except for those 2 things, which are just structural, I have no pain ever, ever, ever. And so what I'm saying is the pain, I believe, I had a childhood. It was not horrifying, but I had a very stressful, death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of childhood that needed to be expressed, that by 19 had reached critical mass. And this is where the buck stopped with this place in my back. And then when I went for the MRI, of course, it was totally reasonable that this would be the reason for my pain, and off we go. Not everyone gets a finding. There's really no finding with migraines or fibromyalgia or irritable bowel. Usually, it's just, this is where we have to just kind of release ourselves to the mystery, because I don't know why it goes. Some people seem to find a reasonable place. That story I told you is reasonable. Sometimes there isn't.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. I've through trying to heal me and through my family being sick, there's just so many factors that come into play, and they all seem to matter, which is crazy. Right at the beginning, I pretty much put myself into remission with diet and was like, diet is everything, right? Because that's what changed my life. And then, my family members got sick and I started suffering again. And it was like, well, I seem to be more sensitive to food. How is that possible? Oh, there's more to it than this. So then it was like, oh, sleep matters. Wow, that was mind blowing. And it was like, oh, exercise actually does improve your life, right? And when you're cripplingly depressed and someone tells you to go on a treadmill, and you're like, fuck you, that's not going to help. And it was like, oh, exercise matters. And now it's like, oh, your experience of emotions can make you sick, which is crazy. And I think I learned a lot about that when my mom had cancer, and through all the scientific studies we looked at, it was like, she's going to die. And that's what everybody said. And then she had surgery, which also almost killed her. And then she, even though it wasn't supposed to work, she found God, became okay with something switched, and you could see how she interacted with people. And it was like, and she knew when she was going to get better, and then she got better. It made no sense. And so I don't know, man.
Well, no, I actually want to say something about this, and I don't know how you're going to feel about it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm not saying that diet wasn't important, and I'm not saying that sleep isn't important, and I'm not saying I don't discount any of it. And I care about my diet and I care about my sleep. But in my opinion, all of those things are simply vehicles to move your nervous system from fight or flight to rest and repair. All of them. So if you believe diet, now diet does matter, so I'm not discounting it, but if you believe diet works and you do the diet and it works because it's also part of the diet, the only thing that matters to your brain and your nervous system when it comes to creating physical illness or exhaustion is safety. If you believe you are safe, just like the herd of gazelle, once safety is registered through the system, there is no reason for the system to be inflamed. And once inflammation is reduced, which is very quick, once we are in a space of safety, everything goes like, and it falls into place. And so that's why I believe it was like one thing for you, and then it was another, because all of these are vehicles toward the ultimate source of human health, which is the state of the brain and the nervous system. And if we feel like we can operate in optimal physical health. And if you study the brain science of what happens when a person is in sustained fight or flight, digestion shuts down. Okay.
Yeah.
The first thing that happens is digestion shuts down. Why? Because when you're running for your life, you shouldn't be hungry or have to go to the bathroom. Like it just makes tons of sense. Circulation and respiration go up. That's why we feel anxious. That's why we feel like we can't get a deep breath, because our body is trying to help us fight, flee, freeze, or survive in other fashions. And so when that necessity is eliminated by whatever means we're doing it, that's when we start feeling free and healthy.
Okay. That makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. Hopefully this podcast can help people. I think you have to be at at least I had to be at a certain level of openness even to consider emotions had anything to do with my well-being, which seems silly looking back on it. But I was very science oriented, and if there wasn't hard evidence in a scientific peer-reviewed paper, then it wasn't true. And now I have no idea what's true anymore.
Which is the best place to be. But here's what I want to say. Here's what I want to say to people out there who might be listening to this with like super rolling eyes and like continuing to like turn it off, but then not, and like being tempted to get rid of us. Okay. So I'm speaking to you, speaking to you who wishes they would turn it off, but they can't. This is your life. This is your precious life. If you believe in reincarnation, if you believe in whatever, that's great. But this is your life that you get to be the specific you with your children and your loved ones and your job and your self-esteem and your beautiful moments. Okay, this is yours. What's it worth to you? Is it worth opening your mind just a little bit? Because although science is what you said you needed, this work that I'm discussing with you is more scientific than surgery. This work is literally explaining the way the human brain functions to keep a human being alive. And so if you need to go the science route, it's there for you. If you need to go more of the spiritual route, it's there for you. But in the end, the only thing matters is, how do you feel today? And if the answer is not great in whatever way, shape, or form, then this is your life. Isn't it worth just replacing your fear and your anger with curiosity? Replacing your resistance to something with just saying, I wonder. Because once you do that, your body becomes your proof. Just exactly what you've been saying this whole podcast, Mikhaila. The reason you're a believer is your body has been your proof. Once we live a lived experience of something, it's very hard to unlive that. And so that's the way I get people to heal. I say, just give me a month. I tell people to take the 28-day challenge of doing my work. And I say, note how you feel today. And there's a video on my YouTube channel called the 28-day challenge. I say, note how you feel today. This is what you do every day for 28 days. Note how you feel at the end and decide if this is a worthwhile practice for you.
That's worth it. Even a skeptical person could give it a month-long shot.
Yeah.
Okay. On that note, if people want to find out more about this or want to follow you online, where should they go?
So, okay, I have a podcast, which airs every Friday called The Cure for Chronic Pain with Nicole Sachs, LCSW. Tons and tons. It's like, I think I've been doing it for 2 or 3 years and I've never missed a week. So just tons of free information there with like case studies and scientific, conversations with doctors, and real-time heals, which is this therapy I do like right there with people have never met before. And so like, it's really like kind of awesome to be in the room with that. So there's that. There's my brand is The Cure for Chronic Pain. So I have a YouTube channel called The Cure for Chronic Pain. I have an Instagram where I put out new stuff every day, which is where you found me, at Nicole Sachs, LCSW. I teach retreats. So depending on when this airs, I will be at the Omega Institute for August 1st through the 6th. And that will be something where we have 5 days with myself and just this dream team of instructors that it really changes your life. I must say it's a real transformative experience to be at a live retreat. So there's that. I have 2 online courses. One's called Freedom from Chronic Pain. One's called Freedom from an Anxious Life. I do a lot of work to get information available to people. Much of it is free so that they can just begin this for themselves. And then if they need more help, they can take a course. I have a Facebook community called Journal Speak with Nicole Sachs that is a closed group. So nobody sees what you post except the members of the group. And it's thousands of people in conversation about this stuff, supporting one another, asking questions, answering questions. Just Google my name. I'm all over the place.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming on and talking to me. That was really interesting.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully that'll help.
It was really great.